Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Startup Sense podcast. This is your host, Jonah Lupton. Thank you for joining us. Do me a big favor and just subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Google Play. That way, you never miss an episode. Okay, let's get into it. So, today's guest is Travis Truett. He is the co founder of a company called Ambition. Their website is ambition.com. I know we're going to talk about, I'm going to ask him how much he paid for the domain if he's willing to tell us. Company's based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. They've raised about $2 million. They went through Y Combinator, probably the top accelerator out there. Company was started in 2013. So, a little over 3 years old now, and they're growing fast. So let's talk to Travis. Travis, how are you, man?
I'm good, Jonah. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me. So before we talk about Ambition, what the hell were you doing before you started this company?
Yeah, so before this company, basically to take you back, 1986, born Terry and Nancy Truett. No, but I was at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where I met two of my present founders and partners. Enterprise management degree, did a bunch of business plan competitions, and kind of was always just tinkering and working on stuff. Graduated, was a ski and climbing bum for 2 years, kind of all over the world. And then my partners and I kind of, came back home to Tennessee and specifically Chattanooga, where we ended up starting a couple consumer-based companies that kind of somehow, as things happened, turned into Ambition, which is a B2B SaaS company. And here we are 3 years later.
Cool. So what does Ambition do exactly?
Yeah, so we're employee productivity. We tap into a bunch of different data sources, and then we are basically able to help employees see their leading and lagging indicators. So, here's the work you're doing every day, and then here's the results every month and every quarter, and then help them kind of visualize and gauge, how smart they're working, their productivity, like what their cause and effect. And then on top of that, we're able to do some really cool kind of like performance management driven things like goals and scorecards and TV leaderboards and, fantasy football challenges and stuff like that. So basically just like a really cool way to be able to show employees, what it is they're doing and kind of like what it's going to take for them to be successful, and then, encourage them and motivate them and recognize them for doing that.
How does a company actually measure the productivity of their employees, and how does that change based on the role, right? I mean, I'm sure the productivity of a salesperson is measured differently than the productivity of a operations person or a customer support person, right?
Yep, absolutely. And so, Ambition right now, our primary focus is going to be, the more transactional, more metric-driven roles like sales and customer support and call center operations. A lot of our biggest customers are call centers. What ends up really becoming cool is that, with Ambition, you're basically building this progression path of being like, let's say, your typical sales example where it's like, okay, SDR1, SDR2, SDR3, and then that turns into like AE1, AE2, AE3. And basically for each like level in the chain, you're able to kind of, tweak like, here's the metrics I want you to be holding yourself accountable to. Here's the benchmarks. Here's even the weights. Like sometimes you'll change the weights to kind of, put more focus, as somebody becomes more experienced on margin as opposed to just like, raw numbers. And so basically you're building out a lot of that, and then, that can kind of extrapolate to, different job types and function types. But again, right now the primary focus is going to be more on those relatively easier to track employees. We haven't really delved in yet to, more of the back office function.
So you guys are a SaaS company, right? So I imagine there was a lot of engineering development in the early days.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, really looking back is kind of crazy to think about, but I mean, we really spent our first 2 years very, very focused on the product and on, like doing it, quite frankly, the right way. Our very first customer was pretty interesting, and this kind of goes against like the typical story where, you sign up, a couple startups for free, and then those startups become 10-person companies and then 20-person companies. Our very first company out the gate was a 400-person logistics brokerage. Wow. And so we basically, very, very early on, we had to do some really hard things. We had to think about hard things like a hierarchical system and a permission system and being able to tap into, a variety of different proprietary data sources. And so basically we just said, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to raise money, and we are going to be focused on really like mid-market and above productivity, because what we kind of found, and for what we're trying to do, is that a lot of times when you're a younger company, you don't really know your process. You don't really know what success looks like. You can't template it at that point. And so, going after SMBs didn't make a lot of sense. And so we said, we know this is going to be really, really hard, but we are going to, and it made it easier to have a kind of a flagship customer from the beginning. We said, look, we're going to spend 2 years. We're going to really focus on a strong architecture and a strong product. And then after that 2 years, we basically went, I think first year we went from like 3 customers and then to like 9 and then to 50 and now to like 150. So, it's kind of exciting because we're finally able to kind of start, paying off all that work that we put in the early days.
What is your typical customer paying you guys per month or per year?
Yeah, I mean, typical customer right now, we're kind of at a point where we don't really do any deals under 12,000 ACV, so $12,000 a year. Our sweet spot right now is probably in the like $20,000 to $30,000 a year mark. And again, typically those are going to be at the very least a 1-year contract. So again, we're kind of in this more difficult part of the market that we had to learn as we went. But now again, it's one of those things that's paying off because I can definitely remember some early days where we were doing some like demos and pilots and free stuff, and now it's nice to be able to look at our revenue and know that the bottom can't fall out at any given time.
What's like the typical size of your client, either by number of employees or revenue? Because I'm sure, this is not an ideal solution for a 10-person company, right? You're looking at what, 250 plus?
Yeah, typically, really our sweet spot is, I would say Ambition seats, you're probably looking at, 25 to 50. And that probably typically, based on what kind of company it is, if that's like a call center or a brokerage, we might have 90% penetration. They might be 50 people, but they might have 40 seats. But, typically with like an inside sales company or like even another software SaaS company, we're typically looking at like 100 to 150 person company is really where we can go in and we can say, listen, like we can take everything you've learned. Like you're clearly at this point, like you've had to do a lot of things right, and we can take what you've done right, and then we can help you scale it to 1,000 people. That's kind of like one of our biggest value props.
Okay. Now, when you guys first got started, you got into Y Combinator. Did you have a product before you got in?
We did, yeah. So we actually had a product, and then we had that initial 400-person company. And so basically, the pitch to Y Combinator was saying, look, we've got a very basic product, but we already kind of have a long-term contract. We basically were able to talk this really big company into using our solution as a months old organization. And so I think we kind of just was able to show them like we were able to get a product out the door. We were able to sell it for a lot of money at the time. And, it's only going to, here's our plan. Like, here's exactly how we're going to learn from this big company to sell to other big companies. And that was basically the pitch. And we got in. That was winter 2014. And then we ended up, we had raised some money previously from Chattanooga investors. But then after demo day, we raised money from some Silicon Valley people, a New York firm and a Chicago firm. And then, packed it back up to Chattanooga and got back on the grind.
Now, that 400-person company, how did you guys actually close them? Did you find them? Did they find you? Did they know how small you guys were in the beginning, or did you kind of have to fake it?
So they were kind of a unique case. So they were a Chattanooga company, and okay. We'd basically known who they were, and we also knew like a lot of their struggles in, they since their start, they had basically doubled every single year, and their growth was just unbelievable. And they just were never able to really kind of codify a lot of what they were doing. And at least technically, everything was still very much on like pad and paper and whiteboards. And we basically just went in and said, listen, like, they knew how small we were. But it was just like, look, like, we're able to look at everything you're doing. We are able, if you could give us a couple months, basically, we are going to take everything you're doing manually and we are going to automate it into a system. And because you're our first customer, we are going to, obviously you're going to get a lot of tailoring and customizations. And the reason it made sense for us was just we were like, okay, what they're doing, as we talked more and more to the market, we're like, some of the things that they're doing, like we're finding out that a lot of other freight brokerages are having this exact same problem. And so we knew that even if we were going to do some customizations for them, like the core product was going to have a lot of like market potential. And so they basically just said, okay, like, look, at this point, like, it's better than nothing. And so, it took a lot of convincing. It took a lot of negotiating and us kind of like, in some ways we probably negotiated too hard, like considering like how desperately we like, really needed that deal. And so, we got that first big customer. And then honestly, the first couple of years was seriously just like working with them. And then when they got to the point where like, okay, Ambition, these guys followed through, they delivered everything they said, and we were able to prove some really, really cool numbers in terms of like, putting together the ROI package for them down the road. We basically just said, okay, who can you connect us to? And they led us to our next 5 customers, and those next 5 customers led us to our next, 20. And again, everything was just very organic, very, very methodical. And again, it wasn't really until 2 years down the road that we like truly focused on, putting together like an actual outbound sales effort.
This is Jonah Lupton, founder of the Lupton Group and host of the Startup Sense podcast. Are you struggling to find the right tech team to build your company's website or mobile app? Maybe you've developed a product but need help with your go-to-market strategy, including branding and marketing. Well, stop worrying, because my team at the Lupton Group can assist you with all of those needs. We specialize in helping entrepreneurs and startups of all sizes launch and grow their businesses. For a free consultation, you can email me at jonahlupton@gmail.com or visit our website at luptongroup.co. You guys are working with customers across multiple different industries?
Yeah. So, we are, again, primarily right now, it is going to be like customer support. So like we have like Cvent. Cvent is one of our larger customers. They have hundreds of customer support people spread out across, India and the United States. Starwood is kind of the same thing. Starwood, they have customer support and pre-sales spread out across like 14 countries, I think, at this point. We have like 1,000-person call center operations across the United States. We have 1,000-person freight brokerages across the United States, all the way to like inside sales. And, we do have some kind of Silicon Valley startup-esque companies that we built relationships with. But yeah, kind of all over the place.
Are you guys aggregating data from CRMs and other apps and products that companies are using?
Yeah, so, Salesforce is definitely a native plugin or a native integration of ours, but really where we found a lot of our success is, and this kind of stems back to that one original company, and, they basically said, hey, we've got a proprietary database. We've got like an enterprise phone system, like, like a BroadSoft phone system, and we've got all this stuff, and then it'd also be nice if we could manually enter some data. And so, again, it was that decision early on, having that one customer that basically forced us to like really think through like an actual like data architecture and platform that, we put in a lot of effort and time early on that now pays off, and that we can basically go to any company in the world and say, oh, you want this? Okay, well, unlike, the majority of companies in our space, and especially at our size, that, can really only offer you like a Salesforce app, we can do it all. And that's kind of where, we're able to punch way above our weight in terms of how we're able to serve our customers. Like we have some customers that are at the point now where they've basically done 7 integrations against like our API. We have an FTP server. We have the ability to like pull in data from like, a Cisco backbone, like all sorts of really, really crazy, complicated, cool stuff. And again, that's like, lifetime vendor lock-in.
So talk to us about marketing. Now that you guys have raised a couple $1 million, you have some money to go out there and acquire customers. How much are you paying to acquire each new customer, and what channels have you guys found to be the most successful?
Yeah. So, we hired, one of the early decisions we made, really kind of right after raising that money was, I have a good friend of mine from college that, was honors English, this amazing writer, and he ended up going to law school, graduates law school, and basically right before he ended up kind of like taking the bar and becoming a lawyer, I kind of convinced him kind of crazily. I was like, hey man, I know that you just graduated law school and you put in all this time, but I think you would be a phenomenal like content marketer, and if you want to join a crazy small startup and, figure it out as you go and do all this stuff, like, I would love to have you. And he thought about it, and he kind of said, yeah, like, honestly, this sounds way better than just like being a lawyer. So we brought him on, and honestly, one of the better decisions we've ever made. And I mean, basically, he just started cranking out content, everything from, blog posts to white papers to ebooks to case studies to, thought leadership pieces to, find, like, literally sourcing people to do like, like guest interviews and guest posts, to sourcing people to kind of like, write under a kind of like a sales alter ego. I mean, just like all sorts of stuff. And so, we've still never done, we've done some experimentations, but we've never really run any real like paid advertising campaigns or like, like paid acquisitions campaigns. Everything up to this point.
Do you guys pay to promote that content?
No, not at all.
No.
And what's crazy is that already kind of what's happened. I mean, I'm wanting to say that our website, I think I looked at this a couple days ago, like for being like, a small SaaS company, I think our blog got 30,000 views in the last like 40 days. And everything has basically just been like, putting out a lot of good content, making it very shareable, making it very applicable. And from content and then like webinars and just, again, like kind of all of that like free material has led to a pretty strong, inbound pipeline. And then, it makes our outbound efforts a lot easier. But again, yeah, I mean, everything has basically been centered around that long play of like, let's focus on really, really good content that isn't like very, salesy, but it's more about just like, things that should be said in the market or things that we found or things that our customers have found. And it's resonated really well. And so I think that's one of the ways we've been able to be really efficient is, being able to do the growth we've been able to do, knowing that, it's not like we're having to hemorrhage, VC money to be able to buy it.
Right. I mean, how do you track, ROI on content is always kind of tricky to track, right? I mean, it's not going to doesn't have the same metrics that you can, Facebook ad campaigns and other PPC campaigns. So, I mean, you're paying this guy a salary to create content. I mean, is there any way that you guys really track it to justify a salary of his, or you just know that traffic and kind of leave it at that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we are not super diligent in like tying it back. Well, like I could not tell you right now that like, like for example, I'm not necessarily tracking like he spent 14 hours on this ebook. And so, like justifying his like hour by hour ROI, but I know that, through Salesforce campaigns, we're able to see that, this one, case study or ebook that we launched 14 months ago. Since then we were basically able to attribute that ebook or case study was downloaded by somebody who ended up becoming an opportunity, who ended up becoming a lead, becoming a closed deal. And, we were able to make like, let's call it $120,000 off of like that asset. So, that you're right though. It is always so tough because typically for us, like somebody that ends up at the end of the day, like signing a contract, I mean, they might have downloaded, they might have been on our website, 20 times. They might have, downloaded or looked at like 7 pieces of content. So again, at least right now, we look at it more of just knowing that, we know that our marketing is ROI positive. We know that we're making money off of it. We know from just like informal conversations with potential customers and customers that it is having an impact. But yeah, it's just, it's so tough to like, truly be able to know that, 14 hours of writing time was able to convert in 12 months to, $84,000 of money.
I know you could drive yourself crazy with those numbers. Talk to me about the domain name, because obviously ambition.com is a really cool name. Did one of the founders own that name already, or did you guys go out and buy it?
God, I wish. No. So we had getambition.com, typical of any, small Silicon Valley company. And there was a guy in Cleveland, Ohio, who owned ambition.com. And I probably reached out to him probably about like 10 months before we ended up buying it from him. And I reached out to him, and he basically told me, he said, "Listen, I bought this domain name like 18 years ago.
Jesus.
It's one of my like, most proud investments." And I told him, I said, "Okay, how much do you want for it?" And he said 100,000. And I said, I think I offered him like 10 or 15 or something. And he basically said, "Man, I appreciate you actually giving me like a real offer, because, people come in here all the time and they're like, I'll give you like $500 or like, $700. So I
Right.
appreciate the fact that you actually gave me like a 5-figure offer, but no." And so basically I guess this is a lesson in like failed negotiation. Every month I came back to him offering, like another 10 grand. Because this is after we'd raised our seed round, and I had talked to our investors, and our investors were like, "Listen, you just raised like $2 million. Like, you need to secure this domain name."
Yeah.
And so, every month I'd go back to him with more money. Like, I'd add 10 grand to it. And then finally, I think I offered him 80, and he was just like, he's like, "Listen, like, if give me 90 and it's done." And I remember just like, it's still crazy to me, but I remember going back to like my investors, and we were kind of talking about it. And they said, they were just like, "I mean, honestly, this is, I know this is crazy, but think bigger. Like, this is a good deal."
Oh, yeah.
And
I think anything under
so,
6 figures is a good deal for you.
yeah, and so we spent 90 grand on ambition.com. It still blows my, I mean, now that it's like years in the past, I'm just like, God, that was amazing. But I definitely had buyer's remorse for like a couple months, just thinking like, I cannot believe that I just spent 90 grand on a domain name. So, but you know what though? I mean, there's a lot of companies that wait too long, and they end up getting screwed.
Right. Whoever owns that domain has them by the balls, basically. And, once they can go to Crunchbase and say, "Okay, this company's already raised $20 million. I'm not selling this thing for less than, 300 grand.
Yep. I mean, that's happening to some buddies of mine right now. They've raised 20 million, and they kind of dropped the ball on it. And now, I mean, they're just screwed. I don't think they'll ever really be able to buy their domain.
The worst one is a couple months ago, I interviewed the founder of Shippo, and I think they're a Y Combinator company too. And the person that owns that name is actually he passed away, and the mother doesn't want to sell it because it has like, an emotional attachment to the domain name.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be a hard one to get. Like, I'm not sure any amount of money, but you know what? Everyone has their price. It's a cool name. So 90 grand. I appreciate you kind of telling us that. Most people aren't willing to divulge how much they paid for their name. So, but I think you got a good deal out of that. Talk to us about hiring, right? So Chattanooga is not your typical startup hub. You guys raise money from Silicon Valley investors. Was there any pressure to move the company out to Silicon Valley and stay there after Y Combinator?
Oh, 100%. I mean, yeah, people thought we were kind of crazy. And maybe we are, maybe we were, but no. I mean, we basically said, when I look at Chattanooga, and I think even since we moved back here, some of the Silicon Valley big names have kind of even come out to say this, is that I'm not convinced that Silicon Valley is necessarily the best place anymore to find product market fit. Because when you think about that stage from like starting a company to like finding product market fit, is basically just like you're constantly in the lab, like working on things, figuring things out, changing things, doing these little pivots, like talking to customers, like it's hard to put like a timeline on that, like when you're going to, when you're going to make it, when you're going to be able to turn the corner. And Silicon Valley is obviously just incredibly expensive. There's a lot of distractions, and there's relatively low employee loyalty. And so we basically just said, look, like we're gonna go back to Chattanooga, where it's cheap, it's distraction free, and a lot of the people that we work with, like, and that we've even been able to hire here, like, they're wanting to like put their families here. Like, it's very much more of like this is where I'm gonna like raise my kids and send my kids to school. And so we just told ourselves, like, it's a lot smarter to come to Chattanooga while we're going to figure things out, because it might take 4 months, it might take 30 months, and it took a lot longer than we thought it was going to like really be at a place where we're able to say, okay, now this is much more formulaic than not. And then like as we figure out our growth plans for the next couple of years, it's like, okay, now what do we want to do? do we want to open an Atlanta office or a Nashville office, in the Southeast? Do we want to open that San Francisco office? I think that now that we're starting to hit that initial scale point, we're at a point where our company is profitable and we're able to say, okay, you know what, like we control our own destiny. We have, let's say that this month, we're putting $90K in the bank. So how do we want to invest that $90K? Do we want to invest it in, X people in San Francisco or 2X people in Nashville? Like, conversations like that. So anyway, I'm glad we did it. It's definitely very hard. We definitely had a lot of people advise us against it. But it is what it is, and I'm pretty happy where we're at now. And so now the plan, as I was telling you kind of before the call, is that we need to hire 5 people pretty much right away. And so it is kind of becoming, the question of, okay, can we hire these people in Chattanooga? Do we want them in Chattanooga? Do we want to open our most recent hire? We just hired somebody 2 weeks ago that's in Nashville. Do we want to basically go all in on Nashville, considering it's, one of the sexiest cities in the country right now? Is it a point where it makes sense to play the game and open up a San Francisco office? Like, these are questions I don't have the answers to yet, but obviously it's on the forefront of our minds right now. And
because your clients are all over, right?
All over. The reality is that most of our companies are no-name, middle of America cash cows that are amazing customers. They love us. They're going to be with us for life. But they're not on the coasts. They're in Omaha or Dallas or Minneapolis.
They've been around for 50 years.
Yeah, exactly. And so, for us, I don't think, there's definitely strategic value in having a San Francisco operation from from the investor standpoint. There's not really that big of a strategic advantage to being there from a customer standpoint. And so that's why, we have thought a lot about a Nashville or a Chicago or some kind of, larger market. The way I look at it is engineering, we basically need to hire an engineer at this point, at least, not thinking too far into the future, but at this point, we need to hire a new engineer every 6 months. We've been able to find that that's doable. We've been able to attract, our last 2 engineers, one came from St. Louis, one came from San Francisco. One is 45, another is 35, a ton of experience, just amazing professionals. They've been able to add so much value, but they're just look, we have kids and we have we're looking for a great quality of life. We've already done the West Coast thing, or we've done the, the big, sexy startup grind thing. And we're looking for just an all around package, and it's worked out incredibly well. And it's kind of funny. That's where we've been able. It's funny how one of the lessons I've learned is that I would take a 35-year-old veteran, engineer that works 40 hours a week, hands down over a 22-year-old that is, just came out of MIT and he's going to work 100 hours a week. And it's just, that's what we're looking for. That's kind of what we found works out really, really well for us. So engineering front, I think we're actually really strong in Chattanooga. When it comes to sales and sales operations and kind of growing out the front office, I do think there's an argument for us to be in a bigger, sexier city. And so that's where we're starting to kind of explore what that's going to look like.
Right. That makes sense. Because I would think going forward, now that you guys have built the product and you're, ready to scale or already scaling, 80% of your hiring is going to be non-technical, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so really, when I think about our roadmap for, I would say this year, we have a couple different financial models based on, how we're wanting to grow the company. But I think the minimum number of people we're going to hire this year is 11. Basically, our most conservative plan is hiring 11 people. Our most aggressive plan is hiring 22. And I would say that of those 11 people, 9 of them are non-technical. They're going to be front office on that conservative plan. And so, it's just a matter of, where does it make sense to put them, knowing that, we're just going to have to scale those 9 to, 25 the next year. So a lot of exciting decisions, but it still is pretty daunting to think geographic expansion is pretty scary. It's it's obviously hard to kind of just revert that once you make a decision.
There are tens of thousands of 3-year-old SaaS companies out there, but not many of them are profitable. You mentioned earlier that you guys are already profitable. How the hell did that happen?
Oh man, just I think in some ways it comes down to, for better for worse, I think it comes down to like some of our original Chattanooga investors and really of kind of what have become mentors of ours. It's just kind of just like their ethos of like, I mean, they bootstrapped and scaled massive companies, and they were just like, look, like focus on, focus on what makes sense. Focus on like doing things the right way. Like your time to scale will come, but like don't get too far ahead of yourselves. And like, they always kind of, drilled into us the philosophy of just like stay lean, and until you're pulling your hair out doing a job, don't replace yourself. And so it's kind of funny. I referred again earlier, I think before the call, as 2016 being our crucible year, where 2016 was brutal. I mean, we all were working our asses off, and we were like, okay, like let's get to this profitability point. Like let's not hire too prematurely. Let's really kind of focus on, again, just like getting to this mythical point of where we're actually putting money in the bank. And we were able to do it. And that was probably like September, October, we hit that. What's cool is that September, October, we hit that corner, we hit that inflection point. And then, as is typical in most SaaS companies, you have a big quarter four. And then December was just insane. Like we did more net new revenue in December than we did the first like 2 years of the company. And so now we're at this point where we're just like, okay, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like a single pat on the back, like, okay, we did it, but we're not trying to, we're not optimizing to like, pay out, $5,000 dividends. Like, we're obviously profitability is just a point of saying that your company and your model works. And now how do you scale that? And so, yeah, we're just like, okay, we can, we basically have three options. We have, we have growing with profitability now. We have being able to, we're kind of sitting on a variety of different venture debt term sheets. And then we have like, the more traditional Series A path. And so we're at this really cool position where we kind of get to decide, and we have leverage based on what we want to do. And so, any entrepreneur listening, I would definitely say, thinking back, even though seeking profitability was kind of against the wishes and best practices of Silicon Valley investors, as opposed to like our local Southern quote unquote conservative investors, it was definitely one of the better decisions we were able to make, because now, we actually have options in terms of what we want to do. But yeah, it was not easy. It was so painful.
And for the audience that isn't familiar with venture debt, it's a simple, you're essentially taking a loan from a financial institution. So you're paying back interest rate, probably, high single digits, low double digits. And then they're getting a small slice of equity, right? Like 2 or 3%, just to give them some upside for the risk.
Yeah, so it kind of varies. Some of it, basically, you have a sliding scale of like some form of very small equity percentage, or in a lot of the term sheets we're looking at, it's just like quite frankly, it's just kind of like a that 10% interest rate without strings attached. So again, we're kind of weighing those. Yeah, but what we've kind of learned about venture debt, and I was definitely very ignorant to kind of the way it works before kind of going down that path, more on us like an exploratory, like learning. To be honest, when we did it, we just said, we feel like we have a pretty good business model. Let's get some conservative bank type people to look at it. And they all came back and they were like, yeah, this is super strong. But, the way that works is that what we've found, my lesson learned, was that you really only want to invest venture debt on front office, basically revenue producing people, because the interest rate is pretty high. So like if you're just going to hire 10 engineers and let them sit there, or if you're just going to put that money in the bank to like feel safer, do not do it. But if you're going to hire, 10 account executives and know that you're going to turn $500K into, $4 million in 3 years, then like, as long as you have the model, it's kind of a no-brainer.
What's your biggest worry? What's the thing that keeps you up at night?
Yeah, great question. I would say my biggest worry right now is we're at this really exciting point where we are ready to, or maybe I'll look back and say we think we're ready. We're basically ready to like kind of hit that initial scale point in the company. Like, we surpassed, we kind of surpassed the $1 million ARR milestone, and now we've got our sights set on, okay, how quickly can we hit this 10 million ARR milestone? And, I just think to myself, like, I want to really make sure we do this right, because again, I've had a lot of buddies that kind of got ahead of themselves, and they hired people, or they hired for positions that they thought they needed and they weren't really ready. Like, they didn't really know exactly what that person needed to do, or they again kind of got a little ahead of themselves. So right now, it's basically, my mind is, how can we be aggressive, and how can we continue to build this momentum, continue to grow fast, while not again just getting ahead of ourselves and making a bunch of bad hires, and then basically being like, man, we just went from like being able to put a ton of money in the bank every month and hire, to now we're just like, okay, we're now back to burning money. We've got people we need to let go. We didn't really think that out. And so again, I mean, that's the struggle from now until, we, sell the company or whatever ends up happening. It's just, now it's just like, okay, like, let's really make sure we do this right, and we don't end up turning into that case where we had a ton of promise and we just couldn't actually execute the scale.
What have you learned over the last couple of years that's made you a better founder, entrepreneur today?
Yeah, good question. I would definitely say,
you've had previous startup experience, right? So,
yep.
You may have learned more in those companies that made you a better founder for Ambition.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think back to the early days, and I think back to, the most obvious lessons that most founders probably just have to learn the hard way. Like, it's like, I don't even like saying them because I'm just so mad at like past decisions, but like, don't pre-optimize. Like, don't build for, when you have, 100 terabytes of data, or don't, adopt brand new technology that you don't need and is just going to make it a pain in the ass to actually get stuff done. Don't hire people that, like, say all the right things, but, at the end of the day can't get stuff done. I think back to, again, past experience and even my experience today. One of the worst things we did, and it's kind of funny because you hear a lot of times that like experienced veteran SaaS founders, one of the first hires they make in their like second or third or fourth company is like immediately hiring like that customer success person. I found that we actually did that, and we hired kind of like a customer success person really early, and it created it just created like a degree of separation between like me as a founder and CEO and the customers. And we actually found that was just a really bad thing. Like, we actually ended up kind of removing that role, and really for the last like, year, 18 months, like I've done a lot of that. And I think that single thing has like made the company a lot better. I have a much better understanding of what's going on. I'm able to, in a lot of times, like actually go in and like understand the problems and fix things, as opposed to just like glossing it over, in more of like a support or success role. It just, little things like that. And then, it's just the classic mistake. Again, it's the cliche of, you're supposed to hire slow and fire fast. Right. There's been so many examples of where we hired fast and fired slow. So again, a lot of it's just like, it's just, figuring it out and realizing that, all that advice that I've been hearing for the last several years, like, I guess I should actually listen to it. But, it takes hard-won experience.
Like, over the last year or even couple years, what percent of your time is actually running the company? What percent is actually fundraising? What percent is recruiting? How do you split up your time?
Yeah, good question. So I would say completely truthfully that, very little time has been spent fundraising, just because we haven't really needed to. And then again, to be honest, very little time has been spent recruiting, because we've again, we kind of made that decision early on to, like, especially after a lot of mistakes in really the first year, year or two that we were like, okay, like let's actually see how far we can go with the current team, and like, let's scale this thing to profitability before we kind of really start, adding on headcount. And so again, recruiting hasn't been that big of an issue. The one thing I would say that again is for our stage, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, is that I have spent a lot of time like kind of working. What's that saying? I've been spending a lot of time working in the company and not on the company. Like, my day-to-day role is still very much like, getting stuff done on a very tactical level. I do think that will change in 2017 as we start to bring on, more and more people, and as we start to think bigger. I will kind of start switching over into that. Okay, like what do we need to get done, every quarter and every year, as opposed to like what's my agenda today. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's kind of really where everybody's head has been. And again, I think that's good and bad, but more good because again, at our stage, as you're kind of hitting that product market fit and getting just past it, I kind of believe that's what you should be doing. Like otherwise you're kind of just like, you're planning for where you're not at. And, getting to that point where customers are just like buying your product and it's working, and, they're willing to like refer it to other people and give you a case study. Like that's hard enough to get to as it is. Like get there and then figure out the rest.
What is your number one goal for 2017?
Number one goal for 2017, I would say, so last year we grew 380%, and I would say that this year my goal is to grow 250%. And if we're able to do that, then we're doing a lot of things right. And, a lot of stuff that the team is going to have to do and I'm going to have to do, to culminate into that. So, I mean, that's kind of really our main goal. If we can grow 250% this year, which I quite frankly think that is very doable, man, it's going to be really exciting. What's to come.
How many new clients do you think you would have to add to grow 250%?
That's a good question. New clients, we're probably going to have to add probably 40, given our ACV. So, I think 40 new customers, which again is very, very doable.
Yeah, so 3 to 4 a month, basically.
Yep. And so, and again, really for us, where my mind is right now is, and we've known this now for a couple years as we've been able to look back at our numbers. Like, typically the last month of every quarter is where we close our deals, and then quarter 4 is always just crazy and amazing and stressful, and it always ends up way bigger than we planned on. And so at this point, my mindset, when you mentioned what keeps me up at night, part of it, I guess, right now is making sure that we get the front office people we need, the sales people and the sales engineers and the customer success managers, we get them in place no later than April or May, right, so that they are ramped and they have pipe and they are ready to, build onto that quarter 4 and that December magic.
In case the person is listening to this podcast, what does your ideal salesperson look like that you would want to bring into the company?
Yeah. So ideal salesperson right now, you're going to have experience, enterprise SaaS experience selling deals, with an ACV of over, $15,000. You have experience selling to VP and C-level executives. You have experience kind of, managing, multiple stakeholders, running presentations, kind of owning that like contract negotiation phase. It's definitely more of a high touch and sophisticated sale. It's I guess your classical like solution sell. So, anybody that has experience there, that, check out our website, ambition.com, and, see if you can get behind the product, and then go to our careers page and read the postings. And we'd love for you to apply because we definitely need to put a lot of people to work.
Cool. Last question for you. If you were to sit down with, an entrepreneur looking to start a B2B SaaS company, what advice would you give them?
Good question. I would say this because this is what I did and it's helped me immensely, is if you are not technical, quite frankly, learn how to code. I mean, even if you're just dangerous, even if you learn just enough to become dangerous. Like I spent basically a year, quite frankly, nights and weekends, learning how to program. I mean, like books and Code Academy and just everything in between. And as a CEO, being able to have knowledgeable conversations with our engineering team, and then also kind of having more of a sales background and being able to kind of bridge that gap has become, I mean, I have to say it's probably one of our critical success factors in terms of being able to do what we've been able to do at the speed at which we've been able to do it. And so I would say that's number one. And then, number two is make people pay for what you're selling. Otherwise, you're not going to know if you're actually delivering value or not. We spent a lot of time early on, and sometimes you have to give it away for free, but we spent a lot of time early on with people just being like, oh yeah, like we love to use that. And, if you spin it up and, put in all this work to like get it ready for us, that'd be awesome. And then we would do that and we'd be like, okay, use this for a couple months and then it's going to cost you, like $6,000 a month. And they were just like $6,000 a month, like no way. And so, build something and then get people to commit and you'll know whether you're on the right path or not. But we spent a lot of early time, a lot of wasted efforts before we kind of grew up and said, okay, let's stand behind this. Let's charge based on the value of the product and then let's go.
Awesome, man. Such great advice. I appreciate your time today. I guess we'll end it there. I mean, I could talk for hours to any entrepreneur about how they built their company, but I guess we got to keep it to about 35, 40 minutes here. So last question, I guess, is how can the audience find you, connect with the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, definitely check out ambition.com. I'd love to hear from you there, whether it's through our careers page or our contact us form. If you want to contact me, I mean, honestly, the most straightforward way is either, LinkedIn, Travis Truett, Truett, or if you'd like to just email me, travis@ambition.com. Love to be helpful as I can. Unfortunately, I don't have the time I once did, but I'll definitely see what I can do. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Awesome, man. Super generous of you. Well, thank you so much. I want to wish you a great 2017. So like you guys are off to a fabulous start here. So hope it continues for you.
Appreciate it. All right, Jonah, have a good one, man.
You got it, man. Talk to you. Bye, Travis.
All right, bye.